I need to tell you about the night a patient checked into my hospital wearing my face, and why, to this day, I'm not certain which of us walked out before morning. I've started this a dozen times and deleted it every time, because there's no way to say it that doesn't sound insane. So I'm just going to tell it the way it happened, in order, and let you decide. All I ask is that you remember one thing as we go. Everything else that night was completely, boringly real. That's what I can't get past, not the impossible part, the ordinary part. My name is Renata Voss, and for 6 years I worked the 11 to 7 shift in the med-surg wing of a regional hospital about 40 minutes south of the Grand Canyon. 62 beds, one little ICU pod, an ER that mostly handled dehydration and altitude sickness and the occasional tourist who went below the rim in July without enough water. The kind of place where the night crew is small enough that 6 people feel like a family and a prison at the same time. And you learn the janitor's grandchildren by name because there's nobody else awake to talk to at 4 in the morning. The night it happened was a Tuesday. A slow one. A full moon the older nurses always blamed things on, and a pot of coffee that had sat on the burner too long and tasted like a penny. It started the way every shift starts. Report at the station, the day nurse rattling off her patients while I wrote on my brain sheet. That's the little folded paper we keep in a pocket, the cheat sheet of who needs what and when. Bed 208, post-op knee, pain meds due at midnight. Bed 211, a diabetic who kept setting off his IV pump. Bed 205, sundowning, hitting the call light for a daughter in Tucson who wasn't coming. I initialed the narcotic count with Denise, our charge nurse, both of us squinting at the little numbers in the med drawer the way you do at that hour. I want you to feel how much of a night is just this. The small maintenance of keeping people alive and comfortable in the dark. Silencing a pump. Bringing a warm blanket to a woman who can't sleep. After 6 years, the rhythm lived in my hands more than my head. The call came down from the ER around 1:40. New admit for observation. Female, mid-30s, found disoriented at a scenic overlook by a park ranger who thought she might be hypothermic. No ID, no phone, no car in the lot that matched her. The kind of patient we get a few times a year, somebody who wandered, or wanted to. I was refilling my water bottle at the fountain and thinking about whether I'd moved my laundry to the dryer before I left the house. That's the whole of what was in my head. Denise slid the printout across the station. She's all yours, Ren. The name field was blank. Under it, in the little handwritten box the clerk uses when a patient won't or can't give a name. Jane Doe. Cooperative. Oriented ×2. That means she knew who she was and where, but not the date. Altitude does that. I printed her armband, loaded the admission cart, and walked to 214 with the wheels squeaking on the left front corner the way they always did. I wasn't afraid. I was tired. A person at work doing her job on a Tuesday. She was sitting up with a blanket to her waist, looking out at the dark. And when she turned toward me, I got that little snag you feel passing someone in a grocery store and not being able to place them. Do I know her? A patient from a past shift. A face from town. I smiled the way you smile, said good evening, and let it go, because that feeling is nothing. That feeling happens twice a week. Blood pressure, 118/74. I wrote it down. Temperature low, 97.9. Consistent with mild exposure, and I made a note to recheck in an hour. Leaning in to clip the pulse ox to her finger, I noticed a callus on her right middle finger. A writer's callus, right where mine is, from 20 years of holding a pen wrong. I actually smiled about it. Huh. Somebody else who writes too much. That's a real thought I had. That's how a mind works. It reaches for the ordinary answer first, because the ordinary answer is almost always right. She answered my orientation questions the way the ER had noted. knew she was in a hospital, didn't know the date, and when I asked her name, she looked at me a beat too long and said, "I was hoping you could tell me." I laughed. It came out easy. That's usually my line. She didn't laugh, and I felt the grocery store snag again, stronger, and told myself she was confused, that confused patients say strange things. A man once swore to me I'd been his nurse in Ohio 40 years before I was born. You learn to smile and keep charting. So I kept charting. It was the eyebrow that got me. I was reaching to check her pupils with my penlight, and in that little bloom of light I saw a thin white scar cutting through her left eyebrow. And my hand, I swear my hand knew before my head did, because it stopped in the air, penlight still on, and my own left eyebrow, the one with the scar from a bike accident when I was 9, went cold. Coincidence, I thought. But then I was looking. Really looking, the way you're not supposed to look at a patient. And one at a time it came apart, the slightly crooked front tooth, the way one eye sits a fraction lower than the other, something I had never once in 34 years seen on another living face, because I'd searched for it, the way you search for your own flaws on everyone else. And underneath the hospital smell, faint, the same cheap drugstore shampoo that was sitting in my shower at home. "You're the nurse," she said, not a question. Yeah. My voice didn't sound like mine. "I'm Renata. I'm taking care of you tonight." Something moved across her face when I said my name, gone before I could catch it. I told myself it was relief. Confused patients cling to a friendly voice. I finished the assessment. I don't know how my hands did it while the rest of me stood off to the side and watched. Then I got out. I stood in the hallway with my back against the cool wall and made myself breathe. And I decided I was tired. I decided the light in there was bad, and the full moon had everyone's imagination up, and that a tired person's face is a suggestible thing that's real. I'd read about it, and in the morning I'd look at her again and laugh at myself. I held on to that explanation like a railing. Then I did one small thing to prove myself right. We photograph patients who come in without ID policy, for the record, in case family shows up. I pulled up her intake photo, fully expecting the resemblance to dissolve under honest fluorescent light, the way a face in a dream falls apart the second you describe it. It didn't dissolve. It was my face. Taken in the ER an hour before I ever walked into her room. Tagged with a timestamp, an intake number, and the words, "unidentified female." And I'd have kept staring, except I saw the necklace. At the collar of her gown, a thin silver chain, and on it a small flat charm, a topographical map of the canyon rim, the kind they sell in the gift shop for $19. My sister gave me that necklace the year I moved out here. And here's the thing about the mind, it will chase one more explanation right up until the end. They sell thousands of those. To every tourist who comes through, it's the most common souvenir for 100 miles. I actually felt relief. This small, ridiculous relief, because the necklace was the one thing I could explain away. And if I could hold on to one thing, I could keep the rest at arm's length. There was a nurse I trained under when I started. Pauline. 62 years old, 38 of them on nights. Hands like a surgeon and a mouth like a sailor. She used to say the night shift isn't fixing people, it's tending them. That most of what we really do can't be charted. She sat with the dying ones when their families couldn't get there in time, held their hand, talked about nothing the weather, a recipe, and she told me once that nobody should have to cross alone. I thought about Pauline that night, standing at the coffee machine, pouring a cup of that penny-tasting coffee I never actually drank, just held, for the warmth. I thought about how I'd become her, a little. How I always told the families the same true thing, that it's all right to be tired, that love isn't the same as staying, that sometimes the kindest thing is to set down what you've been carrying. I had said it 1,000 times. For one moment, holding that warm cup, looking down the dark hallway, everything was ordinary again, and I loved it. This quiet, broken little building and the sleeping people in it who were mine to keep safe until morning. I held on to that moment. I've held on to it ever since. Then I went back to check her temperature. She was awake. Of course she was awake. "You found the necklace," she said, looking at the empty spot at my collar. "You keep it in your locker. The clasp catches on your stethoscope." I hadn't told her that. Nobody knew that. "How do you know that?" I didn't have the air to make it a question. She patted the edge of the bed, and against everything in me, I sat, because my legs had stopped being reliable. "Do you remember the drive here tonight?" she asked. I opened my mouth to say, of course. The 22 minutes of highway I'd driven 1,200 times, and it wasn't there. I reached for it, and my hand closed on nothing. "Getting ready, yes. The necklace catching on my stethoscope, yes. And then just the station. Report, like a page in a chart nobody had filled in." "Highway hypnosis," I said. "Nobody remembers routine drives. What did you have for dinner?" I couldn't find it. "When did you clock in tonight?" 11. I always clock in at 11. But when I tried to see the moment the badge swipe, the hello to Denise there was that same smooth blank, and under it something cold beginning to rise. And I did the thing you're not supposed to do, the thing I'd watched patients do 100 times when the floor moved under them. I got angry, because anger is what fear turns into when it can't find anywhere to go. "I've been a nurse for 6 years, I said, shaking. "I know my own life." "You do," she said so gently it was worse than anything. "That's the problem. You know it. You just can't find any of it right now." She looked at my hand. "Go look at the census, Renata. Not my room. Yours." I don't know why I obeyed. I think part of me already knew, and going to look was the only way to keep not knowing for a little while longer. The station was empty. I realized I hadn't seen Denise in a while, and when I tried to picture her face clearly, it slid away like everything else. Her crossword was on the desk, folded to a puzzle, and it was completely blank, though I'd have sworn she'd been filling it in all night. I pulled up the census, our unit, room by room, and there I was, room 210, Voss, Renata, female 34, admitted 4 days ago. I won't read you the whole thing. I couldn't even now. Codes I recognized the way you recognize a word in a language you used to speak, and a line at the bottom, in the flat clinical shorthand we use because the family reads it later and we can't afford to feel it while we write it. Single vehicle, an overlook, a ravine, extended submersion, poor prognosis, family updated. I read it until the words stopped being words. Then I walked down the hall past 212, past 213, and the door to 210 was open across from her room. There was a bed in there, machines around it, breathing in that slow, patient rhythm I'd tended 1,000 times on 1,000 other nights. I didn't go closer. I didn't have to. I already knew whose face was on that pillow, and I stood in the hallway between the 2 rooms, the one I was working in and the one I was dying in. And I finally stopped reaching for the ordinary explanation, because there wasn't one left. "If that's me," I said back in her room, "then who are you?" She was crying now, quietly. "I'm the part that came in tonight, the part that's ready to rest." She wiped her face with the back of my hand. "You're the part that got up and kept working, because working was the only thing you knew how to do." I looked down. I was still holding the pen from report, the one that had been skipping all night. I clicked it against my brain sheet. No ink. I turned the sheet over. Blank. Every box I thought I'd filled tonight. The blood pressures, the temperatures, the times, all of it blank. I'd been pressing an empty pen into empty paper for I don't know how long. because it was the last thing that still felt like being alive. Ghost is wrong. A ghost knows. What I was that night was something more human and worse. A person who could not put down the work of living, who loved this place and these people, and the small, orderly kindness of the routine so much that when everything else was taken, this one stubborn piece just kept clocking in, kept the rounds, kept the building's voice low and steady so nobody would be afraid. Including me, especially me. "Why tonight?" I asked her. "Because they're turning off the machines in the morning." She said it plainly, the way you have to say the true things. "Your sister lands at 6. She's going to sit with you and hold your hand and tell you it's all right to go." A small, wrecked smile. "I didn't want you to hear it from a stranger. I wanted you to hear it in your own voice." 6 a.m. I have never once clocked out before 7, but the machines don't keep a nurse's hours. It turned out neither did anything else. I sat on the edge of the bed next to her, next to me, and for a while neither of us said anything. Outside, the sky over the canyon was doing the thing it does before dawn out here, where the black goes soft and gray and you feel the enormous shape of the land before you can see it. I'd watched that sky from that window 100 times. It had never once occurred to me to wonder why I was never hungry, why the coffee never ran out, why the same slow Tuesday seemed to fold back on itself, night after night, patient after patient, all of them people I could help, none of them ever quite noticing that the nurse taking such careful care of them had gone cold days ago. "Does it hurt?" I asked her. "The letting go part?" "No," she said. "It's the holding on that hurts. You've just been doing it so long you stopped feeling it as pain." I thought about my sister on that plane. I thought about all the ones I'd sat with, the way Pauline taught me, the true thing I'd said 1,000 times and never once believed applied to me, and across the hall the monitors changed, not an alarm, just a slowing, a softening, the sound I know better than my own heartbeat because for 6 years it was the thing I listened for in the dark. And I felt it, a door I'd been holding shut with both hands, easing open. "I'm scared," I told her. My own face, wet with my own tears, looked back at me with more tenderness than I have ever once shown myself. "I know," she said, "but you don't have to work tonight. Somebody else has the floor now." She took my hand. "You took such good care of everyone. Let someone take care of you." I can't tell you what happened next, whether I lay down or simply stopped, whether there was light or dark or nothing. That part is gone in the same clean blank way the drive was gone, and maybe that's a mercy. Maybe some things aren't meant to be carried back across. Here is what I do know. My sister landed at 6. She sat with the body in 210 and held its hand and told it all the things you tell someone you love when you're giving them permission to leave. And a night nurse came in and sat with her kind, quiet, steady, at the end of a long shift. My sister never got the nurse's name. She wanted to send a thank you card afterward, and the hospital checked. They checked the staffing records, the floor logs, all of it. There was no nurse on duty that morning matching the woman's description. But my sister described her clearly. She'd had a thin scar through her left eyebrow. She'd worn a silver necklace shaped like the canyon. She'd been holding a pen that didn't seem to write, and my sister hadn't had the heart to mention it, and she had known exactly what to say. Denise, who is real, who my sister eventually met, has no memory of a colleague who looked like me at all. I've made my peace with most of it, with what I was, and how long I held on, and how much it hurt without my ever letting myself feel it. With the ravine, and the machines, and the 22 minutes of highway I'll never get back, but there's one thing I can't stop turning over. It's the reason I'm telling you any of this. If I was the part of her that couldn't stop working, if I was already gone, already 4 days into a shift with no end, then the nurse who sat with my sister at 6 that morning, who wore my scar and my necklace and held my broken pen, who said exactly the right things and did not let her cross alone, I had already let go by then. I remember letting go. So, who took the floor?